Jonas Koffler is a kind-hearted, badass author whose life is the perfect definition of what it means to be a creative entrepreneur, especially in a non-douchey kind of way. You are really going to enjoy today's conversation. So Jonas, his friends Neil Patel and Patrick Vlaskovits all co-authored their New York Times best-selling book, congratulations, titled Hustle, The Power to Charge Your Life with Money, Meaning, and Momentum. Now, when I first read the title of that book, I kind of rolled my eyes inside. It was not visible. But when I opened up the book and read this new definition and read the book, it really is filled with so much, and it's really good. So today we talk about this new definition of hustle. I think it was a little bit difficult for me to digest the concept of trying to have hustle in your life when I was just coming off of like a year of trying to turn down the forcing of work. You know what I mean? So I really appreciated this new definition of hustle. We also talk about the 4 different kinds of luck and 4 various directional movements within this new definition of hustle and momentum. So I'm not going to give you any more spoilers except to say that Jonas generously provided us with a really cool worksheet as a Brave takeaway, which you can get in the show notes for this episode. So without further ado, I give you Jonas Koffler. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of bare naked bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Are you ready for some bare naked bravery?
I'm ready.
Let's do this. I'm really glad you're here, because I've spent the past couple weeks going through the book. I'm very impressed, first of all, because it is chock full of all sorts of things. Like it really, I felt like it could have probably have been like 8 times longer and been like as deep as my fist. It's like a really big, it could have been a really big honking book. So on one hand, I thank you for not making it so long, but I also think like, there's so much that we could dive into, so I'm kind of at a loss. However, I will say, I want to know a little bit more about you specifically, because the book talks a lot about how you do what you do, but I want to know more about Jonas.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, a blessing, and an honor, and I'm just glad that I can contribute in some way. So it is sufficiently honking big, I would argue.
It is.
We didn't want to write a tome per se, but we're nearing 300 pages, so I think that's plenty. But yeah, so my journey, some of it's obviously in the book, but for me was also very much, I think it was figuring out the story of identity, right? Like how do you surface who you really are? And that's what this book really deals with. So for me, it has been an incremental building, an apprenticeship, seeing myself as my own greatest work in progress. So if you can see that, it's very sort of out of rank, very Jungian, this idea of filling your bucket of identity, these little droplets. Eventually it's going to spill over. And what spills over is really your truest and highest and most evolved self. And that's true in creative capacity. through trial and error and failure and success. It's true as an entrepreneur. It's true as just being simply a kind, decent human being who wants to help other people and in the process help themselves, right? And so this book is one manifestation of that. But where it all began, I was born in Boston. I lived around the country, grew up in 14 states and 3 countries as well, and had somewhat of a nomadic upbringing by academics and artists. I never really fit in per se. I was always kind of unconventional in my approach to things and always questioned authority. But at the same time, I always tried to sort of figure out what was the deep burning desire for me to make a statement in the world and how to find my voice. And that's true not only of my intellectual pursuits, but also creatively, and figuring out also how I could sustain myself, sustain the physical frame, if you will, and not have to fit into someone else's rule structure, but instead could collaborate more effectively and allow myself to build a nice living and to have the freedom as well. And so, again, a lot of it was trial and error. It took time to get to the place where I am, but we're talking about, a body of work and 20 plus years of professional experience, meeting remarkable people and being able to work with true thought leaders doing interesting work and changing the game on their own terms. And I picked up a lot along the way, and I had incredible mentors, but also incredible doses of luck, right? And we'll talk more about luck in this interview, but for me, that's kind of the journey, sort of in very general, broad terms.
I'm still a nomad to some degree. So I totally get, we all are, yeah. I also really understand and I know a lot of us understand the feeling of not being able to fit in and kind of getting fed up with the feeling like you're a square peg in a round hole, be it like in your own career or how to put yourself out there as a creative entrepreneur or just in general, politically speaking. So what do you have to say about how hustle can help someone find their place of belonging?
Sure. Well, that's a really profound question, actually, Emily. So a couple of things. It can absolutely. And I think one of the messages that was very important that we put out in the book is to say that, one, you're not alone. Two, one of the biggest determinants of your well-being and your success in life or your sense of fulfillment is going to be about finding your tribe, localizing that sense of belonging and interacting, not necessarily through this medium, which is nice, but in the flesh, in the real world. Okay, so part of it is self-confidence, which is I would argue, most important factor in determining happiness and fulfillment and well-being. The second one would be belonging. So getting out there and putting yourself out in a place where you're attracting like-minded folks, right? So that you can potentially collaborate with them. Perhaps it's just finding a support group, some kind of community. That's absolutely critical. But that only comes by way of you taking some risk in life, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not this like overt, unbearably heavy risk. It's small risks you take every day. Like, that person over there is ostensibly or seemingly is doing some interesting work. I should probably talk to them, right? I'd love to hear what they're doing and maybe they can inform me in some way of the work I'm working on and so forth. It's coming from a place of contribution, I think, but it's also recognizing there are tons of other people out there. How do you seek them out? What I would argue is that you do something that moves you. You may not have a clear destination. You may not have the perfect idea or the perfect new work, but put yourself out there, run some lean experiments every day, be open to serendipity, and I think that in a very practical sense, why not set a goal, like try to meet one new interesting person every day. All right. And that's not that difficult to do. Even if you're the shyest among us, you can still get out there and introduce yourself to someone, right? Or acknowledge someone in some small way. And hopefully that'll lead to an interesting conversation that moves you forward in some way. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah. And I think that sense of belonging for me over time has come from not only just every day looking for it, but also staying open to the fact that it might look different than I think it does.
It always is the case, I would argue.
Right? Yeah.
We start with this idealized vision of how things should be and how we think things should appear in the world. And that's all a perception thing. And the beauty is that it's always not that way. It's always the opposite, generally speaking. And the best people I've met have never been like through forced encounters, right?
Right.
It's saying, okay, wait, actually, I'm totally wrong about this. So I think a lot of it's sort of clearing that trap and also recognizing that the real power is in not only being open and flexible, but like getting out of your own head for a little while, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I have a question. We're going to deviate a bit.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So when I first saw your book and I saw the word hustle and then I read the subtitle, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so schmarmy. And also, this is also coming
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, this is also coming from the heels of spending like 6 months plus trying to not hustle so stinking hard.
Uh-huh.
And so just because it's exhausting, or at least the definition that I understood it to be. So when I picked up your book and read it, I was like, okay, I can do hustle if it's this definition.
Right. Okay, look, I get it. And the whole point is it's subjective, Emily, right? So,
yeah.
You know, but continue.
Well, no, I was just going to read the official definition, unless you have it memorized.
I do, but go ahead. You read it, and then we'll break it down.
The book is co-authored by Neil Patel, Patrick Vlaskovits. Am I saying it sort of correctly?
Vlaskovits. That's close.
Okay. And Jonas. And so the three of them define hustle as decisive movement towards a goal, however indirect, by which the motion itself manufactures luck, surfaces hidden opportunities, and charges our lives with more money, meaning, and momentum. So can we talk about luck?
Happily.
Okay.
So luck. The way that we break down luck, Emily, is in 4 different categories, and this is based on the work of a neuroscientist who was at Stanford named James Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And so he posited, all sorts of theories around luck, and what we did was to try to extend his work and explore it. And the synthesis led us to recognizing that the 4 types of luck generally manifest in the following ways. One is what we call random or dumb luck. It's the luck of pure chance, right? And that's that luck where the classic example would be you're going to a place and it's maybe super crowded and some serendipity happens to find you. So for example, you're going to a music festival, and you can't get a ticket. And there are 1 million people in line in front of you. And one of them turns around and says, hey, would you like to come with us? We have an extra ticket. That's random luck or dumb luck. All right. The second form is specific to this book. It's called hustle luck, which is the luck of motion, the luck of movement. And that is that sort of decisive movement that you mentioned in the definition, right? And so movement leads you so going to introduce yourself to someone might create some serendipitous outcome. That's the luck of motion or movement. Or you posting this interview might lead to a deeper interview or another project that happens, right? Mm-hmm. That's hustle luck, the luck of motion or movement. The third form is hidden luck. And this is an interesting luck. It's the luck of creative synthesis. It's a luck of taking 2 ideas that seem disconnected and finding a new way to tie them together that will lead to some kind of innovation, let's say, right? Startup companies do this all the time, stacking the value in new ways. That's innovation. Mm-hmm. That's hidden luck, the third form of luck. And the final form of luck is probably the most amusing or fun form, which is called quirky luck. And that's the luck that we all have ascribed to us through our unique and individual traits. We're all born with them. So if luck happens in 4 different ways, well, guess what? We're very lucky to begin with. The deeper theory that I have here is that luck is actually housed deep within our bone marrow, our DNA, and it bubbles up when we need it most. And that's true as a guide for our survival, but also for our success in the modern world today. So that's what I would tell you about luck. But getting back to the definition, the way we see hustle is not necessarily putting your head down and running through a wall. And it's not simply working or being busy for the sake of being busy. It's a little more nuanced and subtle. So there's decisive movement toward a goal. We know we want to propel ourselves in some way. We're ambitious in that regard, whether we want to create great music or art or the new business or whatever it is. But beyond that, it can be indirect. And we talk about this notion of obliquity, meaning the best path is not necessarily from A to B, right? But instead, it's that space of what happens in between. Because the rational mind thinks that we need to move in a certain way and the dominoes will fall. It doesn't always work that way. And in the creative process, which you're familiar with as a musician, you know that it's the process of working through music and break a tune, for example, and breaking down the song and reconstructing it. We're like, wow, that sounds incredible. I'm going to try it that way. And that's that nuance, the creative process. That's fascinating and much more fulfilling than the end product, I would argue. right?
Oh yeah.
Again,
Oh, I
not
totally agree with you.
concept, right?
Oh yeah.
That's ADD.
The other day I pulled out a song that I don't normally do on guitar and then just like taught it to myself on guitar, my own song on a different instrument, right?
Okay.
And I finished teaching it to myself and was like, oh, blast. It sounds way better than on this instrument than the one that I had written it on originally. Right. So there's a constant like picking up the item, whatever it is, the item holding the luck and looking at it from a different angle to see like, oh, can I get to it from this way? Can I get to it from this way?
Yeah, it's multifaceted, right? And that's a really beautiful metaphor that you used because that's the truth. And I think any great creator these days or throughout history, it hasn't been, here's the perfect image of what I want to do. I'm going to move in that direction and get there, and that's the end of it. That's one out of like, the chances of that are infinitesimally small. So instead, it's like, let's work through this process and let's figure it out along the way, and we'll come to some kind of greater conclusion or gratitude or recognition through the process. But here's the other thing I think is really important about this, that indirect point, right? They're not going straight from A to B, but what happens in between. We are hardwired today for instant gratification, right? We want it now, we deserve it now, and all that bullshit. And the reality is that we're going to live long, long lives, right? Mm-hmm. Our identity, our creative inspirations, our pursuits are going to change throughout time. That's part of the evolution. So why not get more comfortable with the ideas? You're working extremely hard towards something. You don't know what that thing is yet. You have a sense of that goal, but it's going to move as well. So instead, it's like, get comfortable with the notion of longevity and work toward that kind of the long arc, if you will, as opposed to that short-term thing. And I think that will feed your soul and also calm you in a way. It's like, why you want to burden yourself with this unbearable pressure? You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, to live a good life is one thing. To live like an incredible, fantastic life is really hard. And it takes a lot of patience. That's what I would argue.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of, when I was teaching full-time, teaching cello lessons full-time, I had all new students apply via an application. And one of the application questions was, in 5 years, where is the cello in your life? Because I wanted that expectation to be set that like, you don't have to be my student for 5 years, but if you're going to set out to learn this instrument, it's like we're in it for the long haul. Right. So, and that's the same thing I've learned with Bravery, with being creative in general. You just have to like know that you're in it for the long haul and that the process is the product.
Right. You know? But also, it's interesting that you would, and that's a question you pose to your students, you're saying?
To potential students. They were not yet students. Yeah.
Yeah, but it bears in mind like that what you're requiring people is to think about a commitment, right?
Right. Well, and it was good for me as the teacher, because I could easily, based on their answers, determine like, oh, well, this is just the next person that saw the latest movie featuring a cellist and saw it was cool and this, or no, this person has been wanting this for a really long time and they're finally letting themselves take the next step to doing it for a long time. So it was kind of a clarifying question for me, so I could anticipate some of the commitment levels that potential students would have. But it was still just a really neat way to get to that aspect of, no, really, why are you doing this?
Absolutely. I mean, there's an intentionality there as well, which I admire. I think, we talk about this in the book. The hardest thing to do is to get started on anything, right? Mm-hmm. And that's true if you're a student of cello or podcasting or writing or
songwriting, starting a business, right. Like anything.
Starting, right? Because we talk ourselves, and we will talk circles around ourselves. We'll talk ourselves out of things. We'll talk ourselves into distractions. But once you kind of set your kind of head into it, your heart and your head into it, then it's just a question of doing. And so I love that commitment piece. I mean, for me, it's all or nothing when I look at projects. That's the commitment. Will this satisfy me? Will this engage me energetically, emotionally, entrepreneurially? Will this like call on some intellectual faculties that maybe I haven't explored yet? Will this test me in some way? And then, am I willing to commit to it, like physically, the endurance aspect of it, all of those things factor in. And you never know, but like the whole thing is like, if you're going to do it and you think it's worthwhile, then you might as well commit to it fully. Even if it's just, for a few months, like a quarter, 3 months or something like that, put yourself completely into it. And I think that the better frame would be, if you don't put yourself into it, if your heart's not fully into it, then get the hell out of it. Don't waste your time. That would be the other side of it.
I can't help but get the hokey pokey stuck in my head. You put your whole self in, you put your whole self out.
Yeah, right. I love it. It's a beautiful game. You can play it after this call.
Okay. Before we jump back into our conversation today, I want to let you know about a free class I've put together for you. Especially if you've been running yourself ragged with everything required to be successful as a creative entrepreneur or an artist or a musician or fill in the blank. You can register for the class for free by going to businessofbravery.com/free-class. So if I'm being honest with you, you're probably exhausted by the whole idea of self-promotion because you're doing it wrong. And I know there's a seemingly endless list of things we have to do when we're running a creative business. But numbing how awkward it feels to promote yourself and bringing yourself to the point of total exhaustion, it's not the solution. So in the class, we talk all about the ingredients inside of your unique self-promotion recipe, and you'll get to hear a little more about my own journey with all things self-promotion, self-image, and personal bravery. You can sign up for the class for free, again, by going to businessofbravery.com/free-class. So if you know your work is awesome, but you feel like you're figuratively yelling at brick walls or going down burnout highway at 100 miles per hour or not getting the response you'd like from your attempts to put yourself out there, then I'll see you in class, because bottom line, we really need your work out there in the world. And in turn, this means we need you to show up for it with your whole brave, kick-ass self. And we need you to do that every day. So go ahead and visit businessofbravery.com/free-class, and let's get back to the conversation. So I'm curious, if you are an all or nothing person,
yes,
how many times have you put all of yourself into something and it not gone the way you wanted it to?
Oh, many times. But the thing is,
do you have like a top two list?
No, but I'll give you a few examples.
Okay.
But just to frame it, right? I think I'm okay with failing. Like, that's totally reasonable.
Right.
If I did my very best, right? Or at least as close to my very best as possible, I have nothing to regret. Do you follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Fine, I'll move on. We've already established that, God willing, I'll have a nice long life and be able to do this as often as I want, right? Okay, so a couple of failures. Let's see. I just want to think of some salient examples for you. Okay, here's one. So I wrote about this in the New York Times. When I was in my mid-20s, I had been working on a film project and working a full-time job at a startup and was not sleeping. And the film was coming to pieces. My actor, I was self-financing, by the way, which you should never do with a film, by the way. It was a narrative short, and it was called Le Chemin de Ténèbres, essentially the calm before the storm, or the path of darkness, depending on how you look at it. But anyway, the film was falling apart. We were shooting a pivotal scene, and my lead actor, he showed up for the shoot the evening, and we were booked to shoot the entire next day, and he got arrested at 3 a.m. Okay. Anyway, needless to say, it set the production back. He made a very stupid decision, and we were able to salvage the product, but it definitely impacted our ability, it impacted our finances, impacted our credibility, and so forth. And so that was really challenging. And look, films are very difficult to make given all the moving pieces. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the film was terrible. It was a horrible mistake. It was just awful. I don't know what the hell I was doing, but I learned a hell of a lot. In some ways, it was a great teacher for me because it helps me understand that it's not just good writing. There's so many components to filmmaking that are required for a film to make sense and to resonate with people and to move them in some way. And so, as an experimental project, great. But as a success or failure, miserable failure. My heart was fully into it for, let's say, 3 years, and it just didn't work, Emily. And eventually, you have to just kind of let these things go and recognize that it was a great tool for learning and move on. And so that's one example for you. And by the way, I had I had a stroke, and that was another huge failure.
Wait. Hold your horses. Okay, you had a stroke?
So the sequence was, right, work very hard on a project and have a full-time job and do other things and try to get this movie done, and then end up in the hospital blind and not able to articulate your thoughts because you have no control of your
man.
exactly, your mouth or your tongue for that matter. So it's pretty debilitating, but it's a good smack in the face. And I like to think of it as like God or the universe stroked me intentionally and said, hey man, you need to start taking care of yourself. Again, about my point of longevity, it's like, why are we doing this? Like, So the film was part of that experience. And then, moving on beyond all that, like I can clearly bifurcate it. There was one existence before the stroke, was somewhat chaotic. Wasn't to say it wasn't unfocused. It just was maybe I was overcommitted, put it that way. And instead, what I would recommend and how I live my life now is you learn to compartmentalize. So you're an incredibly busy creative artist and entrepreneur, and you have a lot of things happening. And, I have a beautiful wife and wonderful relationships and so forth. And you're trying to honor all these things that you're doing and interested and involved in. And I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but I recognized when I have to back off of things, you also have to listen to your body, because that's a huge piece of it. Your mind will tell you one thing, oh, I'm invincible and I can do all these things and I'm not going to fail and all this stuff. And the reality is you will fail. I recommend you fail. I recommend that you let your life get a little messy, because you're going to find what was really important to you in that process. And that's going to liberate you or unfetter you to do your best work. And I recommend, if in your case, or someone who's just getting started, not you obviously, but I'm just saying the archetype, like do horrible artwork, do horrible music, do a really crappy startup, do the worst film you can possibly make, become like the slowest marathoner in the history of the world. Whatever you're doing, do horribly first, because that's going to lift the pressure off of you. And that's going to liberate you and allow you to pursue the things that you really want to pursue. And you understand that all these things are iterative. They're all stacked on top of each other. And so the architecture of what success looks like is, again, like it's that indirect, movement up and down, side to side, until you figure it out. Okay, here's where it is. And I've accomplished it. And actually, so what? I've accomplished it. So what? I have this book. It's a New York Times, Los Angeles Times, USA Today, IndieBound bestseller, now in 15 countries. Great. Who gives a shit? Honestly, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful container of ideas. Yeah. And I hope it helps change people in some way, even in small ways. That's not what matters. What matters is that I put myself through it. I was able to work with beautiful collaborators in Patrick and Neil, my wonderful agent, an incredible publisher, and so forth. But what ultimately matters for me personally is like, I started at a certain point. I had no idea where I was going. I had a sense of what the end goal would be. We produced the book. It did extremely well. I'm very pleased about that. I couldn't be more thrilled. What a blessing. Okay. And now I'm moving on to the next thing, right? Or 7 things, as it happens to be, if you want to compartmentalize my life, and I can tell you what that looks like. Yeah. But the point is, like, I'm still moving forward. The first unseen law of hustle, do something that moves you. Again, I didn't know exactly when we started hearing this word and we were doing our social listening and trying to unpack the word that was the frame for this book, like where that would go. But we kind of trusted it and we built it out around that. Do you follow me?
Yeah, I do. You started talking a little bit about this, which you guys mentioned. You talk about it in chapter 8 of the book, the like types of movement, hustle movement, like the outside, inside, inside, upside, inside, outside, outside, upside. Can you?
You're confusing me.
I know.
Okay, so here's the idea. Yeah, right. So this is under the chapter, I think it's 8, that's right. Choose your own adventure. So the premise, right, the sort of the foundation of this idea is this idea that as you hustle, the first unseen law, right, you're doing something that moves you. In this context, we try to apply it to careers, or what we call the uncareer, because we see the career as something as a stack of projects, both horizontally and vertically, right, that you build. That's your body of work, whether you're in a careerist role as a professional with the different projects you take on, or you're a freelancer sort of in this freedom economy and what we call the project economy, where you're you're doing many different things and you're building your expertise and talents and proof around it, or you're moving in and out of companies, so what that frame is, so the idea is like if you're starting out, if you're in college or if you're going straight into the workforce, you're going from outside some corporate entity inside it. That's outside inside. You're getting a foot in the door in some way. Typically and traditionally, it's submitting a resume, doing a battery of interviews, and getting hired, or them saying, look, we're going to pass, thank you, right? Mm-hmm. If you get a foot in the door, that means you're starting out. You have an opportunity to do something. Mm-hmm. And so what happens when you're established? Then you want to move up, right? So the idea is you're inside the company and you want to move up. That's, that social mobility, you're climbing the ladder. That's inside upside, right?
Got it.
So you're going from entry level schmo to manager or executive or whatever you aspire to be. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're CEO now or middle manager. I've hit a ceiling. I think I'm going to move on. So what do you do next? You go inside outside because you're starting in a new territory. Maybe you're freelancing now, right? Maybe you're launching your own company or consultancy or your own, music lesson entity online, right? That's inside outside. You're getting out of like the traditional conventional sense of working for a company and you're going to kind of rewrite the rules on your own terms. That's the unconventional gray territory that you get to map and create. All right? It's incredibly exciting, but it's also very hard to do. And then the highest, like most evolved form of that sort of gray territory is what we call outside upside. And this is where you take an idea or a service or a product or some kind of experience, music or art or otherwise, and you blow it up, right? So this is the Elon Musks of the world. This is Prince. This is like doing something that's so good, it's irresistible, and then it catches on with the popular imagination. So if you're off, you're building the next generation of how people will travel or transport themselves, that's Tesla, right? It's very, very low impact on the environment and an incredible experience to drive. If it's musical or artistic, you want to have a very unique and defined voice that resonates with people. So that's the Prince of the world, right? Or Bowie or whomever. It's that evolution into that higher category of enlightenment and experience that is so like there's something so uplifting to the human spirit. That human sense of human possibility and imagination that so resonates with us all. That's the outside upside. It's so hard to do, but again, if you're going to aspire to it, wonderful. But again, it's like you have to move through that arc. And I imagine it may be true for you. It certainly was true of me, and probably for your listeners and audience as well. It's like they're probably at some point, whether they're moving outside inside, inside outside, inside outside, or outside upside. They're somewhere in that continuum. They have to know where they are, and they're going to be in motion probably for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That movement element, it comes full circle with the hustle bit, which is fitting. That constant movement is crucial. One of my friends described me as somebody who hates feeling stagnant.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
That's a good thing.
She told me that, and I was like, "Thank you so much."
Right.
I don't know if it was intended to be like that as a compliment as I took it, but I took it because I was like, this is so true. I hate feeling stagnant. I hate that sense of nothing's happening. There's no movement. There's no change occurring, all that.
Right. But you're that sort of classical artist, the dreamer and doer on your quest. And while we've already established that longevity is kind of that's the arc, again, if we're lucky, and we are lucky having established that as well, then why would you be stagnant? If you want to recharge, fine, recharge, meditate, go for a hike. You can do that every day. But why be stagnant? Why waste time when you can be creating? It's such a joyful experience. So I hear, especially as a musician, that's a higher level of consciousness, right? That's like God's mathematical language. It's beautiful, right? And we get to experience that. So by all means, continue and don't be stagnant if that's not your trip.
Yeah, no, man, no way. Well, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I'm so glad to have met you, and I'm so glad to have read your book, and we'll put all the links and all the awesome stuff in the show notes. As a final takeaway, do you have one small task or small homework assignment to gift to our listeners?
Yeah, I do actually. So this is the way we've divided the book is into sort of there are three pieces, right? The first is the heart layer,
Mm-hmm.
and that maps to the first unseen law, do something that moves you. The second is the head layer, and that maps to keep your head up and eyes open and look for opportunity. And the third is the habits layer. And the habits layer is where the rubber meets the road. The whole idea here is that there is a framework, which we're going to share with your audience, around creating more opportunity. And it comes in 4 different flavors, right?
Okay.
So this framework is called POP. When we think of pop, like pop culture, they're things that have caught on, right, in some way. And so the idea here is like, what if we can help people sort of catch on or propel themselves forward, much like a company would on the stock market, kind of blow up and increase its value or perceived value or the awareness of that person in the world. POP is about the personal opportunity portfolio. And it's just as true for creatives. You might be carrying, if you're an art director, you might be carrying a portfolio in your hand, or you probably would be doing it digitally, or a musician with your repertoire, etc. But the idea is anyone can develop this. And so the 4 pieces are I'm going to pull it up because I specifically wanted to give it to your audience. And this is like a first of its kind offering, if you will.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the personal opportunity portfolio, and as I said, there are 4 different flavors, and I'm going to pull up in the book as well because if you have your copy there, you can see it. But the basic premise is that opportunity comes in the flavor of potential, which is the opportunity of capability, people, the opportunity of community, projects, right? That big project layer. It's the opportunity of creativity, and then proof, the highest level, and that is the opportunity of credibility. And if you get those right, you're setting yourself up for success. And so the chart that we'll share with you will be, I guess you can send it out through email or post on your site. But we'll send that on to you. And it's interesting. And each layer has sort of its own discrete pieces as well, from potential being all around, experiments and storytelling and growth and innovation, to people layer, which is really about building honeypots and understanding the power of the ABCs, which is always be connecting, people leverage, and helping and serving, contributing in some way. And projects, of course, as I said, is that it's that opportunity of creativity where you're applying your talents in a way that adds value in the world, keeps you productive, and that also allows you to monetize, which is really important to sustain the physical frame. And then finally, building on the proof. And proof is all about me pointing at Emily and saying, Emily is the person who does this, right? She's not only the world's greatest cellist and cello teacher and piano instructor, but also is a badass podcaster and is doing all sorts of interesting things, right? You're taking a lot of swings. And that's discoverability, reputation. You have that track record of success. It differentiates you and it draws out your quirks. And there's a lot of value in that. And so that's the POP chart. So that's what I'll be. I'm
excited. I'm excited to give that to you guys because I want it for you. Like, I want all of the stuff that Jonas and I have talked about today. I want it for all of you. And I would hope that you leave today with a little extra hunger for it too. Thank you again for joining us, Jonas. I really appreciate it.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm not going to lie. I have a little bit of a crush on Jonas, mainly just because I'm resonating with everything he was saying completely and wholeheartedly. So if you are interested in looking at that worksheet and checking out that brave takeaway that he mentioned, it is in the show notes for this episode. You can go to barenakedbravery.com to get that. And you are such a treasured group of audience. I really, really appreciate that you spent the time today to listen to this conversation about such important issues like momentum and luck and hustle. And I really appreciate that you chose this episode to listen to today. I don't take it lightly. I really don't. I know I say that a lot, but I really don't. So with that, if you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as Jonas and I enjoyed making it for you, then I highly recommend, and I would ask, that you give us a review and rate the show in your iTunes desktop app or on your podcast app on your phone. It doesn't take a lot of time. But you know what? If that doesn't appeal to you and you would rather just share this episode with a friend, it's pretty easy to do in all of the apps that you listen to podcasts. There's usually a share button. Or you can just share the whole podcast, barenakedbravery.com, with a friend via text, email, I don't know, pigeon, messenger pigeon. Wouldn't that be crazy? Wow. Okay, so speaking of things you are a part of beyond all the bravery that deserves to be spread far and wide, you are a part of the Bare Naked Bravery coloring book, which features all these artists from around all over the world, and that means that you can color while you listen to the next episode of the podcast, and you can color art from a fellow listener, which is super rad. You can go to and download that for free, or you can purchase a paperback version eventually by visiting barenakedbravery.com/color, and you can add yourself to the email list to get notified when we get that published on Amazon for paperback. So if you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it is brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, which is a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting really unique soundtracks. They work with filmmakers and other creatives like podcasters like myself. So to find out more about all the artists, including Music Box Licensing and their artists, all of the musicians, and all the other sponsors of the show, please visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm so looking forward to being with you next week. We have some really great things in store for you. And until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.